The gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6930, the Asset Seizure for Ukraine Reconstruction Act, as amended.
The clerk will please report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6930, a bill to authorize the confiscation of assets subject to United States jurisdiction of certain foreign persons and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Phillips, and the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson, each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 6930 as amended.
Without objection.
I yield myself as such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 6930, the Asset Seizure for Ukraine Reconstruction Act, as amended. Mr. Speaker, we have long known the Russian oligarch class is an important pillar of President Putin's brutal and corrupt regime. These Russian oligarchs have been able to enrich themselves and use their wealth to consolidate power within their country and increase their influence abroad. As President Putin continues in his unjustified and premeditated full-scale invasion into Ukraine, the United States must do all that it can to identify and sanction his cronies bankrolling this brutality. The Asset Seizure for Ukraine Reconstruction Act, as amended, takes an important step in this direction. The bill expresses the sense of Congress that the President should confiscate property subject to U.S. jurisdiction worth over $2 million belonging to Russian energy companies or Russian oligarchs whose wealth is derived from corruption or by support of President Putin. It expresses the sense that such property should be held, used, administered, liquidated, or sold, and that any funds gained from such sales should be used to benefit the Ukrainian people. Furthermore, this legislation would also create an interagency working group to determine the proper constitutional mechanisms through which this could be achieved. The luxury villas and fancy yachts and private airplanes of Putin and his cronies is tainted with the blood of Ukrainian people. Their corrupt assets should be seized and should be used to rebuild Ukraine. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Minnesota reserves. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, sadly, on February 24th, war criminal Putin launched an unprovoked, unjustified, murderous war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. The humanitarian toll has been devastating. More than 5 million refugees have fled Ukraine. More than 7 million are believed to be internally displaced. And we've seen on our screens the heart-wrenching images of Putin's horrific war crimes in Bucha, Mariupol, and elsewhere. The economic toll for Ukraine is no less devastating. The World Bank has forecast that Ukraine's economy could contract by 45% this year, with a worst-case scenario seeing a GDP shrink of 75%. The Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal said last week during a visit to Washington that Ukraine would need around $5 billion a month in budgetary support as long as the war continued, and then roughly $600 billion for a broader rebuilding effort. To rebuild this country, the Ukrainian Prime Minister requested not only additional financial support from the United States and its allies and partners, but also the transfer of Russian assets that have been frozen by the global sanctions of the regime to be provided to Ukraine. The U.S. should answer this call. The resolution we are considering urges the President to establish an interagency working group to determine the constitutional mechanisms through which the United States could not only freeze, but seize the assets of Russian oligarchs within the United States if this property was derived through corruption linked to the Putin regime. The liquidated funds are to be repurposed for the benefit of the people of Ukraine, including post-conflict reconstruction when the Ukrainians win, humanitarian assistance, and assistance for the security forces of the government of Ukraine. I was grateful to co-lead this legislation with our colleague Tom Malinowski of New Jersey. Thanks to an amendment from our colleague Peter Meyer, the bill also urges the administration to expand sanctions on the members of the Russian parliament, the Duma, who voted in support of recognizing the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, which are illegal fabrications. This vote served as a part of Putin's pretext to Russia's unprovoked and unjustified war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. Anyone who supported that vote must fall under U.S. sanctions, full stop. The administration needs to seriously consider how we can use the frozen Russian assets to help Kyiv fight and continue winning, then rebuild its country. Therefore, I urge all colleagues to join me in supporting this important bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from South Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Minnesota reserves. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.